Okay, I'm back again with another little whiteboard video on coronavirus as it seems to be playing out, to my mind at least. And got another little wee diagram here. I use the word wee diagram in homage to our friends in New Zealand and to Jacinda Ardern, who have just made the excellent decision to go straight into level 4 lockdown, which is the best thing they could possibly do. And that's a little bit about what I want to talk about. So, another abstract whiteboard video for people who are sort of visual learners like me. This large circle here represents the whole world. This little circle here represents me, or you, the individual. 2 or 3 weeks ago, you, the individual, were free to go anywhere in the world that you dreamt of going. Meeting anyone you wanted to meet and doing anything that you wanted to do. 3 weeks ago. It seems like it was almost beyond memory. Then, a little while later, got restricted. All of a sudden, you couldn't go out of your own country. What happens next? You can't go out of your own state. Next, maybe you can't take your kids to school. Finally, you cannot leave your own home. Now, what we're doing, what has led this charge from the outside in, and this is the problem, is the outside in, is the virus. In the world we get so many fatalities from COVID-19, and I won't do all the dots, but so many cases, and we'll just do dots that represent fatalities, let's say, and so we close our national borders. But then we get so many fatalities within our national borders, so we close down to our state borders. Then eventually it's on our front doorstep and we close down to our home. The problem with this model is, this is what we're doing, is it's reactionary. Each time we're reacting to what is happening. And the truth of the matter is that the virus is one step ahead of us each time. The virus is already in here when we close that border. It's in here when we close that border. And there's a distinct possibility that it's going to be in your home by the time you're choosing to self-isolate. Now, I'm not blaming anyone for this because I think this is a perfectly natural state of affairs. What we're doing is we're retreating from an enemy by degrees and in increments, which seems like a sensible thing to do. And I think in terms of the economy, and I don't mean just to save the economy, I mean from the economic perspective, doing it by degrees probably makes sense. That would look better to me in a business plan. It would make a lot of sense to retreat slowly. But the problem with that model is that the virus remains one step ahead. Why are we doing it that way? I simply think that it is human nature, okay? Put yourself in the position of the Prime Minister or any leader watching this play out and trying to make a decision. They're down the beach now. Does anyone want to lock themselves away in their home for however many months? Of course not. Does anybody want to say we're shutting down international travel if you're the Prime Minister? You want to say that? You don't want to say that. Nobody wants to do that. That does not sit well with any individual's ideal set of choices or how the world should be. But do it they must, because they have. But they do it when the virus is here. And unfortunately, not before. But it is an understandable, natural thing to do. I think a lot of people are doing it on an individual basis. I'll wait for them to tell me when to not go to school, or when to not leave my state, or when to lock myself down. No individual wants to be living in their house for the next few months. Not one. No leader wants to make the world live in their house for a couple of months. Not one. So we regressively scale down slowly, trying to stay one step ahead of the virus. But guess what? The virus stays one step ahead of us. How do we know? You look at all the other countries in the world that are just a couple of weeks ahead of us. So what can we do? Here's the world. Here's the individual. Here's our house. The smart thing to do, which New Zealand has just done, is go into lockdown as soon as possible and get some space between the attack of the virus and your defensive position, both as individuals and as a country. Why is this so much better? Well, for one, all of the other countries are screaming out to those countries that are yet to be infected, saying, this is what you need to do. You need to get ahead of it. You need to self-isolate. You need to be ahead of it. We're not doing it quickly enough because it just does not feel right. It just doesn't feel right. But it's going to happen. It is inevitable. It is inevitable that we are going to end up at some point in lockdown, whether it's 2 days from now or 2 weeks from now. Or, Jesus, it could be tomorrow the way things are moving. Sooner rather than later is better. And here's why. None of us are going to enjoy being in our homes for 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever it's going to be. None of us. Not one person is going to go, yay, this is a really good thing. Not for that length of time. But psychologically, for each individual, I think it is way better to accept the reality that we face sooner and then start thinking in a matter of weeks how we can start increasing our freedom of movement. Increasing your personal freedom feels a lot better than reducing it. The anxiety that an individual faces when we're allowed to go out of our homes, but oh, I'm not sure if I should yet. The anxiety that we feel over that decision has got to be a lot less than the anxiety that we're feeling over, oh, they're saying lockdown, should I lock down a day before? Should I try and get ahead of this thing myself? Should I go with the flow with everybody else? Should I wait for my elected leaders to tell me? Well, I just think the elected leaders are just a little bit behind the curve, just because they're human. And this just does not feel like the right thing to do. I think moving out from full lockdown is going to feel a lot better to all of us than moving in. From a business and economic perspective, I think it's going to be way better. Simple graph. Time, business success, let's measure it in dollars if you like, whatever, growth, doesn't matter. It's going to be way better to be slowly coming up over time than to be slowly coming down. I think the sooner we come down, the sooner we can go up. Now, I don't mean that on a global economic scale. We've got to prevent hyperinflation. I'm not an economist, it's beyond me. I think they're doing a reasonably good job of that side of things. But from the pandemic side itself, I just don't think that we are psychologically or socially prepared to accept that this is a losing battle and that we are better to retreat from the front lines, to completely fall back, to regroup, and then slowly begin moving forwards. Because if we fall back and regroup, the virus can't catch us. If you think about this in military terms, from the front line back to your home territory, the virus doesn't follow you. Okay? It uses you to transmit it. If we come back in and create some space between the stage that the virus is at, global, national, statewide, county-wide, town-wide, village-wide, whatever, the virus can't follow us. It needs us interacting at this level in order to get this close to our homes. So the bottom line is, if we go into lockdown early and create some space between us and the people carrying the virus at a national or statewide level, then the virus cannot jump the gap from people you have not met to you and in your home, and so you can't share it and transmit it with anybody else. It cannot jump space. It's not airborne. It needs to go from one person to another. End human movement for a short period of time, as extremely as we can, without cutting off essential services. Just look up Jacinda Ardern's level 4 lockdown procedures on YouTube. We stop it in its tracks. Or we retreat slowly, one step at a time, and the virus comes with us every step of the way, because the virus has a 2-week incubation period, which means the virus has a 2-week head start on us. No matter if we close down, if we retreat, the virus is already ahead of us. So let's go into lockdown now. Let's do it personally, without having to be told. Because the people who are telling us, and I think they really have got our best interests at heart, but they're not prepared for this. Who could be? They're doing their best. They're doing what feels right. And so are we. But we need to do what is scientifically the right thing to do. We need to do what the scientists are telling us to do. We need to do what those countries who are already in lockdown, but whose health systems are completely overwhelmed, and whose doctors are having nervous breakdowns because they are sending people away that they cannot take care of. They're doing triage. We need to do what those people are telling us to do, because they know more about this than we do, because they have the advantage of hindsight.